It's no secret. Life stretches us, challenges us, changes us, and sometimes crushes us. The human experience is infused with loss. Loved ones die, relationships end, hopes and dreams get shattered. Adapting to our changing world takes compassion, courage, and a conscious choice to be willing to move beyond the pain of loss and change. Conscious grieving is a process, a practice, a healing and awakening journey. I learned the hard way how vital the skills of conscious grieving are. In the span of 18 months, my dad died, I filed for divorce, and I became the primary caregiver of my 2 teenage daughters, and I started a new career. I tried to do it all alone. I didn't know how to ask for help or who to ask. My relationships, career, and health suffered. I ended up with adrenal fatigue. That's what happens when your body is overloaded with cortisol, the stress hormone. A normal cortisol level is between 2 and 11. Mine was greater than 40. Exhausted, not sleeping, anxious and uptight. I wasn't eating, and when I did, I turned to chocolate, chips, and ice cream. We all have our favorite comfort foods, don't we? Life had to shake me up in order to wake me up. Have you ever had one of those moments? One of those shake you up to wake you up moments? Maybe you're having one now. My search to get my life back on track led me to becoming a certified grief coach, a life coach, and now a mental fitness trainer, where we focus on positive mental fitness. Working with my own coaches and mentors has transformed the way I think and feel about grief, love, life, and relationships. Now it's an honor to be invited to talk to people, including you, about embracing grief as a natural and necessary response to loss and change. The problem is, most people don't understand what grief is or how to grieve in a healthy and supported way. Let's change that now. Just like a diamond is formed by extreme pressure and upheaval, so too do you become more brilliant and resilient with the upheaval of change. Grief has the power to transform and awaken you to your purpose, your passion, and your brilliance. Today I'm going to redefine and normalize grief, highlight the consequences of avoiding grief, and introduce you to the benefits of conscious grieving for healthy living. The present moment is the place of our personal power, free will, and choice. So let's all take a moment now to arrive. I want you to take a deep breath, and as you release that breath, consciously let go of everything you had going on before you came here and everything you have going on when you leave. Bring yourself fully into this moment, fully awake, aware, and available for everything that's here for you, right here and right now. Now take a moment to notice how you feel. Sometimes we take breathing for granted. When we're feeling stressed and overwhelmed or triggered, we hold our breath and we forget to breathe. Science has proven that 3 deep breaths can shift your mental, emotional, and physiological state. We spend a lot of time in our heads, regretting and ruminating over the past, and stressing and worrying about the future. When we're up in our heads, we disconnect from our hearts and the people in front of us. We become distracted, disengaged, and easily triggered. I want you to remember this simple breathing exercise anytime you feel stressed, frazzled, hurried, or out of sorts. Use your breath to instantly recenter, refocus, and reclaim your energy and your power. Now let's redefine and normalize grief. When life is disrupted with change, we also experience loss. When there's loss, grief will be present, whether we acknowledge it or not. Grief is the normal, natural, and necessary response to the loss or change in any familiar pattern, behavior, or relationship. Let me say that again. Grief is the normal, natural, and necessary response to the end or change in any familiar pattern, behavior, or relationship. Grief is the suffering you feel when something or someone you love is taken away. Grief is multifaceted. It affects us mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. During the grieving process, your mind, both conscious and unconscious, scrambles for answers that you can't find, recognize, or accept. Your hearts feel shattered. What used to be your life becomes unrecognizable. What used to be your future becomes completely foreign. What you thought was solid disintegrates. What you once visualized vanishes. Your hopes and dreams crumble. During the grieving process, you may find it hard to concentrate, focus, or make clear decisions. You may experience feelings of profound sadness, confusion, relief, guilt, shame, regret. You may have difficulty eating, sleeping, or finding the energy for daily living. These are all normal reactions to loss. The more significant the loss or life transition, the more intense the grief will potentially be. When I was in the process of separating from my husband, I went for a walk by the Glenmore Reservoir. And it was early winter, and there was that thin layer of ice across the reservoir. Someone had put some pressure on the ice, and the cracks in the ice just rippled across the reservoir. And as I looked out, the first thought for me was shattered hopes and broken dreams. I felt lost. My life was unrecognizable. When your life is uprooted like that, you ask questions, hundreds and thousands of questions. Some questions no one has the answer to. Sometimes you're not looking for an answer. Sometimes all your heart needs is to ask the question. Sometimes simply saying the question out loud relieves the pressure, eases the pain, and soothes your soul. Sometimes words come out, words you don't mean, words you would never consider or think of saying otherwise. But these words do escape your lips, and so you need to be with someone who is simply holding space for you, holding space with a non-judgmental attitude, with acceptance of who you are and where you're at. You don't want someone trying to make you feel better, fix or advise you. You want someone to listen, to validate, to let you know that you're not alone. All that other person needs to do is listen, to be there, to be present, attentive, and truly listening. Imagine that person being a heart with ears. Can you relate to some of these thoughts and feelings? You're not alone. Did you know that there are more than 45 life events that will trigger grief, whether you acknowledge it or not? Grief doesn't reserve itself for death alone. divorce or relationship breakdown, loss of health, a job loss, a career change, or a promotion, loss of financial security, graduation, marriage, or retirement, loss of a friendship or a business partnership, a miscarriage, loss of a cherished dream, death of a pet, loss of safety, trust, respect, selling the family home, when your children gain their independence or your parents lose theirs. Whatever the cause of your loss, conscious grieving for healthy living will help you to come to terms with your loss, cope with the pain, ease your sadness, find new meaning, and eventually move on with your life. Grief is as unique as your fingerprint. Your grief response will vary depending on the relationship, the circumstances, and your previous experiences with grief. How you deal with grief will also vary depending on what you've been taught, observed from others, and adopted for yourself as coping strategies. How have you dealt with grief up until now? Or have you? Many people believe the way to deal with grief is to numb, avoid, or suppress it. They rush to get on with it or hurry to get over it. There's no getting over grief. There's only going through it. If you knew that suppressing your grief could lead to heart attack, stroke, diabetes, cancer, anxiety, depression, or even suicide, would you be more likely to take the action steps to deal with your grief? Many people believe that they've dealt with their grief until a new life event, a death, a divorce, a career or a lifestyle change, or a global pandemic comes along and knocks them off their feet. Old, unresolved grief comes back for healing. How do you know if you're carrying unresolved grief anyway? Unresolved grief is basically anything you wish that was better or different than it is or was. It's anything you wish that you had said or not said, done or not done, or that that other person had said or not said, done or not done. Unresolved grief is the result of not being able to express your thoughts and feelings in a way that you feel heard, validated, and understood. When you hang on to these thoughts and feelings of regret, anger, blame, or shame, you carry the weight of that unresolved grief with you. It's like carrying an overloaded suitcase through the airport. Some of my clients have said unresolved grief feels like this heavy, itchy, dark wool cloak, or like carrying a sack of rocks on their back, or having a piano thrust upon their chest. The good news is that in as little as 8 weeks, my clients consistently feel happier, healthier, lighter, and free. Your body carries the weight of grief until you learn to let the emotions flow through you. So I want you to imagine that your heart is your emotional loss pot. And when you're young, you experience a loss of someone or something you love, a pet, a grandparent, or a friend who moved away. And if you don't know how to grieve, you intellectually rationalize that you're over it, you make yourself feel better, and you tuck that loss into your emotional loss pot. And then another loss comes along. You graduate from high school, you move away to college, maybe you experience the loss of your first love relationship, and once again, you tuck that loss into your loss pot. Depending on your personal and professional experience, there may be a few or many small or significant losses that you've been tucking away in that loss pot. Well, eventually, the stress of life comes along and starts to heat up that loss pot. And as any of you know a boiling kettle will only boil for so long. Eventually, that emotional energy or that steam has to go somewhere. Eventually, you'll blow. It's impossible to move forward when you're emotionally incomplete with your past. It's like trying to build a new house on a cracked foundation. When we're stressed, we're not at our best. And anger is deep sadness unexpressed. The loss of trust, safety, respect, connection, intimacy, and love in any relationship is always related to unresolved grief from the past. This is why when we get into a fight with someone we love, or maybe we don't love, everything from the past gets stirred up. It gets recalled, rehashed, revisited. Grief doesn't go away on its own. The idea that grief takes time sets us up for long-term pain. Just how long does it take anyway? Imagine you're driving down the Trans-Canada Highway and you get a flat tire. You pull over to the side of the road, you get out of your car, you lift up the trunk, you take out a chair and you sit down. And you wait. And you wait for your tire to reinflate. Grief doesn't go away on its own. Giving grief time will not heal your heartache or your pain. Taking deliberate action steps to embrace your natural and necessary grief will. I've worked with people who have carried their grief for more than 30 years. Even those who thought they had done their grieving have found that they were carrying unresolved grief. Healing doesn't just happen with the passing of time. It's what you do with that time that makes the difference. Avoiding doing your grief work is like avoiding paying your taxes. Reconciling and healing grief takes time and action. You can't change what happened, but you can change what you do next. You might be asking yourself now, when is the best time to take action steps on my grief? The answer is now. When you embrace your grief, you release your pain. Let's go a little deeper and talk about feelings. Feeling fine is a lie that we tell ourselves and others. Fine equals feelings inside, not expressed. Individually and collectively, we are all grieving the loss of something right now. The tension of the ongoing pandemic, a crumbling economy, mounting unemployment, the loss or potential loss of income, homes, and businesses, the loss of financial safety and security, and the loss of hopes and dreams is being felt by everyone in some way. Over the last 18 months, my clients have been making these statements and asking these questions. They say, I just can't stay focused. What's wrong with me? I just can't get out of bed in the morning. Why am I so tired? I don't understand why I'm so emotional. Why do I feel like crying all the time? I've lost my patience. I have such a short fuse. Why am I so angry? What's on your mind and your heart right now? What's your version of the questions being asked by others? Why do you think you feel the way you feel? Unresolved grief makes us feel listless, lifeless, and dull. It takes a lot of energy to suppress that natural and necessary emotion of grief. And we're ill-prepared to deal with loss. We've been taught to chase pleasure and avoid pain. We've been encouraged to work hard, get good grades, get a job, acquire things. But most of us haven't been taught what to do when we lose something or someone we love. It's not always easy to talk about how you feel. However, there's something powerful about acknowledging, articulating, and allowing the presence of grief. Let's take a moment now. Acknowledge how your life has changed over the last 18 months. How has your life been disrupted? Just take a moment to reflect and acknowledge one loss you've experienced in the past 18 months. Now articulate. How does that make you feel? One or two words. How does the thought of that loss make you feel? Notice the emotions that show up when you give voice to your thoughts. Now allow those feelings to flow through you. What do you notice now? All stress, strife, and suffering starts at the level of your thinking. Whether you're conscious of your thoughts or not, your thoughts are driving you to feel the way you feel and act the way you act. Much of what many of us have learned about grief is an intellectual solution to an emotional problem. The intellectual solution is a Band-Aid at best. Underneath that protective layer, unresolved grief festers. If you broke your arm, you wouldn't hesitate to ask for support. You'd get yourself to the hospital and you'd receive the necessary medical attention. A broken heart requires support too. By now, you're probably seeing how unhelpful and unhealthy grieving has led you or your loved ones down a path of continued pain and suffering. Any coping strategies you've been using to avoid or suppress your pain have been silently robbing you of your health, happiness, and vitality. If you are someone who has learned to suppress your grief, you may notice you don't have as much energy as you used to. Suppressing your emotions is like holding a beach ball underwater. Imagine you're holding that beach ball under the water right now. You can only hold it for so long. Eventually, your body will get tired, your arms will give up, and you'll have to let go of that ball, and it'll pop up out of the water. The emotional energy of grief stores itself in your body until you learn to allow to let it move through you. Your life changes when you do. Conscious grieving for healthy living is a transformative journey from the head to the heart, a courageous and compassionate journey of awakening, healing, and growth, an effective and efficient process, and a life skill that will serve you, your children, and children for years to come. Reconciling unresolved grief and being emotionally complete means feeling happier, healthier, and lighter than you do today. Acknowledging that it's perfectly all right to feel sad from time to time. You don't have to stay there. Realizing that being able to talk about the loss you've experienced is indeed healthy. Being able to enjoy fond memories without pain, regret, blame, guilt, or shame. Claiming your circumstances instead of your circumstances claiming you. And finding new meaning, purpose, passion, and moving on without the fear of being hurt again. Everyone is being touched by grief right now. The pressure and the upheaval of life is creating the conditions and the motivation required to let go of unresolved grief that is weighing you down. When we know better, we do better. From this point forward, make it a practice to acknowledge what you've lost, articulate your thoughts and feelings, even if that means writing it down on a piece of paper, and allow the grief to flow through you. You are not your feelings, they won't last forever, and you are not alone. You can't change what happened. You can choose what you do next. You can use your power of will to choose, commit, and be willing to move beyond the pain of loss and change. We create our life experiences through our way of thinking. Freedom from pain and suffering comes from the willingness to accept what has happened and to learn to let it go. Be compassionate, patient, and loving with yourself and others. Navigate this time with an open heart and do what you need to do to get support. Trust that your soul knows the way forward and let it guide you in each step that you take. Most importantly, share what you've learned today with others. I'm here to support you and your loved ones in facing your individual grief journey, and I hope that you'll come and speak to me later.